You chose him. You betrayed everything we had. I'm done begging.
My therapist says sharing can be therapeutic, and maybe someone going through something similar will find this helpful. So here goes. My 10-year marriage ended in the most devastating and ultimately liberating way possible. And looking back now, I can honestly say it was the best thing that could have happened to me and my son, even though it nearly destroyed me at the time. Let me give you some context about who I am. I'm what people describe as solid and dependable. Not flashy, not the life of the party, just a regular guy who worked as an IT consultant pulling in decent money. I coached my 8-year-old son Tyler's soccer team every Saturday morning, never missed a school event, and genuinely believed I had built a good life with my wife Jennifer. We met in college, one of those classic opposites attract situations. She was studying communications, always the center of attention at parties, charming and ambitious with big corporate dreams. I was the quieter engineering student who fell hard for her confidence and energy. We got married at 23, both optimistic and broke, but happy. When Tyler arrived 6 years into our marriage, everything felt perfect. I thought we were building something that would last forever. But somewhere around year 8 or 9, things started changing in ways I couldn't quite put my finger on at first. Small things that were easy to dismiss individually, but added up to something disturbing. Jennifer started spending hours scrolling through social media, looking at influencer accounts and luxury lifestyle posts, making comments about how boring and predictable our life had become. She'd sigh heavily when I suggested our usual Friday night movie at home, like the thought of spending a quiet evening together was somehow disappointing. I tried planning more date nights, surprising her with flowers, being more attentive. Nothing seemed to help. The distance between us just kept growing, this invisible wall building higher every day. Then Derek entered our lives about a year ago, though I didn't fully understand his significance until it was too late. Jennifer got promoted to senior marketing manager at her firm, and Derek came in as the new regional director. From the very first week, she started talking about him constantly. Derek has this amazing vision for the company, she'd say over dinner. Derek thinks I have real potential for advancement. Derek suggested this incredible strategy that clients loved. At first, I was actually happy for her because she seemed energized about work in ways she hadn't been in years. I thought having a supportive boss who recognized her talents was exactly what she needed to feel fulfilled. But then, the late nights started happening. Jennifer would text me around 6 saying she had to stay for an important meeting and wouldn't be home until 9 or 10. This happened multiple times a week. When she'd finally walk through the door, she'd smell like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine, and her cheeks would be flushed like she'd been drinking. She started dressing differently, too, buying expensive designer clothes that seemed impractical for normal office work. Tailored blouses, designer skirts, high heels she'd never worn before. When I'd ask about her day, she'd be vague and dismissive, then disappear into the bathroom for long showers. The phone thing was what really started setting off major alarm bells for me. Jennifer had never been secretive with her phone before in all our years together, but suddenly she was guarding it like it contained nuclear launch codes. She'd take it with her to the bathroom, sleep with it under her pillow, angle the screen away from me whenever a text notification came through. Multiple times I walked into a room and she'd quickly end a phone call, claiming it was just a work thing that could wait. But the laughter I'd heard through the door didn't sound like work conversations. It sounded intimate and personal in a way that made my stomach twist with anxiety. I desperately wanted to trust her. We'd been together for over a decade and built a life together. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid and insecure, that maybe this was just what happened when your wife got a big promotion and was working with high-powered executives. Maybe I was being unreasonable to feel threatened. So I pushed down the doubts and tried to be supportive, even as every instinct I had screamed that something was very wrong. Then came the Tuesday night that changed everything forever. It was late September, unseasonably warm for fall. I'd just finished reading Tyler his favorite book about dinosaurs, tucking him in and listening to him chatter excitedly about an upcoming school field trip to the Natural History Museum. He was such a sweet, sensitive kid, and I remember feeling this overwhelming wave of love for him as I turned off his bedroom light. I walked downstairs to find Jennifer sitting at our dining room table, the same one we'd picked out together at a furniture store when we first bought the house. She had this strange expression on her face that I'd never seen before. Nervous, but also almost excited, like she was about to reveal something she'd been planning for a while. She said we needed to have a serious conversation about our marriage. My heart immediately sank because you never want to hear those words from your spouse. But I sat down across from her and tried to keep my voice calm and open. I asked what was on her mind, genuinely wanting to hear her concerns so we could work through whatever was bothering her. Maybe we needed marriage counseling. Maybe we needed a vacation to reconnect. I was ready to put in whatever work was necessary to save our marriage. What came out of her mouth instead was so shocking that for a moment my brain couldn't even process it. She said she'd been doing a lot of thinking and soul-searching lately, and she believed we'd fallen into a rut. The spark was gone, she claimed, and she needed something more to feel fulfilled as a woman. She was only 33 years old, she reminded me, and she didn't want to look back at her life someday with regret about missed opportunities. Then she said the words that felt like a physical knife twisting in my gut. She wanted us to consider opening up our marriage. She actually used those words, open marriage, like it was some kind of reasonable solution. She said it could be healthy for both of us, could bring back excitement and passion, could actually strengthen our relationship in the long run. I sat there completely frozen, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach, my brain struggling desperately to process what I was hearing. An open marriage? After 10 years of what I thought was monogamous commitment? With our 8-year-old son sleeping peacefully upstairs, completely unaware that his mother was proposing to blow up our entire family? I asked her if she was serious, if she'd really thought this through and understood what she was asking. She nodded firmly, launching into what sounded like a carefully prepared speech about how lots of modern couples were exploring non-traditional relationship structures and finding happiness and fulfillment. She insisted repeatedly that this wasn't about not loving me. She just needed more excitement in her life. I asked her point blank if there was someone specific she was thinking about, already knowing the answer but needing to hear her say it out loud. That's when she dropped the second bomb that made the first one look like nothing. She admitted that her boss, Derek, had expressed romantic and sexual interest in her. He told her she deserved better than a boring suburban domestic life, that she was too vibrant and intelligent and beautiful to be stuck in such a predictable routine. He'd suggested they spend one night together just to explore the chemistry between them and see where things might go. Jennifer said she'd told him she couldn't do anything without talking to me first, which I guess was supposed to make me feel better about the fact that my wife was sitting here asking permission to sleep with her boss. She promised it would only be one time just to get it out of her system. It wouldn't mean anything serious. It was just physical attraction that needed to be explored. The betrayal in that moment was so overwhelming and crushing, I could barely breathe. This woman I'd loved for over a decade, who I'd supported through every challenge and celebrated every success with, who I'd built a home and a family with, was sitting across from me, calmly asking if she could cheat on me, like it was some kind of reasonable therapeutic exercise. Not only that, but she'd clearly been having intimate conversations about this with Derek before even bringing it to me, meaning they'd been discussing their mutual attraction while she was still wearing the wedding ring I'd saved up for months to buy her all those years ago. I sat there in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute or two, my mind racing through 1,000 different emotions simultaneously: shock, anger, humiliation, grief for what we'd apparently lost without me even realizing it. Jennifer sat there watching me expectantly with this hopeful expression, and I could see she genuinely believed I might actually agree to this insane proposal. She'd somehow convinced herself this was a valid path forward for our marriage. When I finally found my voice and spoke, it came out cold and level in a way I barely recognized as my own. I told her I had a third option she clearly hadn't considered in all her careful planning. She could pack her bags and leave our house tonight, taking only her personal belongings, or she could sit back and watch what happened when I dealt with Derek personally. But either way, our marriage was finished. Done. Over. There would be no open relationship experiment, no one-night pass with her boss, no working through this in counseling. She'd made her choice the moment she entertained Derek's advances and brought this proposal to me. And now she would live with the consequences of that choice. The look of shock on Jennifer's face was almost comical. Her jaw literally dropped open and her eyes went wide. She'd clearly expected me to either crumble emotionally and beg her to reconsider or reluctantly agree to her demands just to keep her from leaving. What she absolutely had not expected was for me to have a backbone and walk away from her with my dignity and self-respect intact. She started backpedaling immediately, her voice getting higher and more panicked. She said she was just being honest about her feelings and I was overreacting to a conversation. We could go to marriage counseling, she suggested desperately. We could work through this together. I just stood up from the table, told her I'd be sleeping in the guest room from now on, and walked away, leaving her sitting there. That night was one of the longest of my entire life. I lay in the guest bed, staring at the ceiling in the darkness, my mind spinning through a decade of memories. Our wedding day, where she'd promised to love me in sickness and health. The night Tyler was born, when we'd both cried tears of joy holding our tiny son. Family vacations and holiday celebrations and 1,000 small, ordinary moments that had made up our shared life. How had we gotten from there to here? But as the initial shock wore off over those long, dark hours, anger started to settle in and crystallize. Not hot, explosive rage, but cold determination. I realized that if Jennifer could throw away our marriage this easily, if she could be manipulated by some arrogant executive into believing our life together was worthless, then maybe I was genuinely better off without her. More importantly, Tyler deserved better than to grow up watching his mother treat his father with such contempt and disrespect. The next morning, I called my sister Melissa before I even left for work. Melissa has always been my fiercest defender and protector, the person who sees through people's nonsense instantly and isn't afraid to call them out. When I told her what Jennifer had proposed, she went absolutely ballistic with rage. She'd never been Jennifer's biggest fan, always saying my wife seemed more interested in appearances and status than substance, but she'd kept quiet for my sake. Now the gloves came completely off. She told me to get out of that toxic marriage immediately and promised she'd help with Tyler however I needed. My next call was to my best friend Ryan from college, who'd gone to law school and was now a successful divorce attorney. Ryan immediately shifted into professional mode, telling me to start documenting absolutely everything before I made any other moves. Every text message, every email, every credit card statement, every suspicious charge, every late night at work. In custody battles, he explained carefully, evidence is everything. The spouse with better documentation almost always wins. He also warned me not to confront Jennifer or Derek directly yet, not to give them any ammunition they could use to paint me as unstable or aggressive in court. Play it cool, gather your evidence methodically, then strike decisively when you have everything you need. So that's exactly what I did over the next several weeks. I started going through our joint bank accounts with a fine-tooth comb, and what I found made me physically sick to my stomach. For the past 6 months, Jennifer had been making withdrawals and charges I couldn't account for. Hundreds of dollars at luxury boutiques I'd never heard of. Expensive dinners at fancy restaurants we'd never been to together. Hotels in the city. She'd been financing her entire affair with Derek using our family's money that was supposed to go toward Tyler's college fund and our mortgage payments and groceries. I moved on to searching for physical evidence around the house. One afternoon when Jennifer was at work and Tyler was at school, I searched our bedroom thoroughly and methodically. In the back of her dresser drawer, hidden carefully under some old sweaters, I found a jewelry box from an upscale store. Inside was a beautiful diamond necklace I'd never seen her wear, far more expensive than anything I'd ever been able to afford for her on my salary. The receipt was still in the box. Derek had bought it for her 2 months earlier. I photographed everything with my phone as evidence. I also found receipts stuffed carelessly into various purses and coat pockets throughout the house. Romantic candlelit dinners, champagne bottles, a weekend getaway at an expensive bed and breakfast in wine country. I photographed all of it systematically, but the real smoking gun was a handwritten note from Derek himself tucked into her work bag. The note was absolutely dripping with manipulative flattery and grooming language. He called her a rare gem wasted on mediocrity, said she deserved champagne and caviar instead of beer and pizza, promised her a life of excitement and sophistication if she'd just take a leap of faith with him. Reading it made me want to vomit. This wasn't love or even genuine attraction. This was clearly a hunter grooming his prey with practiced precision. With Ryan's professional advice, I kept completely quiet about what I'd found and started digging deeper into Derek's background, because my instincts were screaming that Jennifer wasn't his first sufferer. Ryan helped me access public records, and what we uncovered was deeply disturbing. Derek had worked at 3 different companies over the past 8 years, climbing the corporate ladder quickly at each one. But at every single company, there had been an unusually high turnover rate, specifically among women who worked directly under him in his department. Multiple women had left their positions suddenly without new jobs lined up. Several had filed anonymous complaints with HR before quitting. 2 had even filed lawsuits that were quietly settled, with non-disclosure agreements and cash payouts. I started reaching out carefully to Derek's former employees through LinkedIn, crafting messages explaining that I was gathering information about him for personal legal reasons, and anything they shared would be kept completely confidential. Most people didn't respond, which I completely understood, but one woman named Sarah replied almost immediately. She said she'd been waiting for years for someone to ask her about Derek, that she'd been carrying this story inside her for 3 years and desperately wanted to finally tell the truth. We met at a quiet coffee shop across town where she wouldn't be recognized by anyone from her old company. Sarah was in her early 30s, well-spoken and professional, but I could see the pain still lingering in her eyes as she recounted what Derek had done to her. She'd been his executive assistant right out of graduate school, young and ambitious and excited to learn from someone so successful in the industry. Derek had started by being an incredible mentor, teaching her about marketing strategy, introducing her to important clients, promising her rapid advancement in the company. Then slowly, the boundaries started blurring in uncomfortable ways. Compliments about her appearance that felt just slightly inappropriate. Suggestions that they grab drinks after work to discuss strategy. Late-night texts that had absolutely nothing to do with business. When Sarah tried to maintain professional distance and boundaries, Derek had turned cold and vindictive. He started criticizing her work constantly, finding fault with everything she did, excluding her from important client meetings. Then one night, when everyone else had left the office, he'd cornered her in the conference room and made his expectations crystal clear. If she wanted to keep her job and have any chance at career advancement, she needed to be more accommodating to his personal needs. He'd actually used those exact words. She'd been so shocked and frightened that she just stood there frozen, unable to respond. When she finally managed to report him to HR a week later, Derek had already built an extensive paper trail painting her as incompetent and emotionally unstable. The HR department had suggested she might be happier at another company, and she'd quit rather than fight a battle she knew she couldn't win against someone so powerful. But Sarah had kept absolutely everything as insurance. Emails where Derek made inappropriate comments about her appearance and body, text messages where he'd suggested romantic after-work activities that had nothing to do with business. Even recordings she'd secretly made on her phone of conversations where he clearly implied career advancement was contingent on developing a personal relationship with him. She'd been too frightened to use this evidence before, worried about retaliation and expensive legal costs and being permanently blackballed from her industry. But when I explained in detail what Derek was currently doing to my family, something shifted in her. She was ready to fight back. She wanted Derek stopped before he could hurt anyone else the way he'd hurt her. With Sarah's explosive evidence in hand, I contacted Detective Marcus Barnes, a seasoned investigator who specialized in white-collar crime and workplace misconduct. I'd found his name through Ryan's professional connections. Detective Barnes took one careful look at what we had, and his eyes lit up with professional interest. He immediately recognized this wasn't just about workplace affairs or personal drama. This was a clear pattern of carnivory behavior, systematic misuse of power, and potentially very serious financial crimes. He asked if he could launch an official investigation into Derek, and I agreed immediately. Detective Barnes moved remarkably fast once he had authorization. Within just 2 weeks, he'd managed to track down 3 more women willing to come forward with their own stories about Derek. The pattern was absolutely identical in every single case, like he was following some kind of hunter's playbook. Mentorship that gradually turned into manipulation and grooming, promises of career advancement explicitly tied to personal favors and romantic involvement, swift and brutal retaliation when the women refused or tried to set appropriate boundaries. But Barnes also uncovered something even bigger and more damaging. He found serious financial irregularities at Derek's current company. Expense reports that didn't match up with actual business activities or legitimate business purposes. Company funds being mysteriously transferred into personal accounts that shouldn't have had any access to them. Invoices submitted for expensive services that were never actually rendered or completed. Derek had apparently been systematically embezzling corporate funds for years, using the stolen money to finance his expensive lifestyle and impress the vulnerable women he was targeting and manipulating. While this investigation was quietly unfolding behind the scenes, Jennifer was getting increasingly bolder and more careless at home. She'd essentially moved all her belongings into our guest room and stopped even pretending to hide her relationship with Derek from me. She'd talk to him on the phone right in front of me, giggling at his jokes and making plans for expensive dinners and romantic weekend getaways. One night, she actually told me flat out that Derek had invited her to spend the entire weekend at his luxury vacation house, and she was definitely going whether I approved or not. I just nodded calmly and made another detailed note in my documentation journal that Ryan had told me to keep. Tyler was starting to sense that something was very wrong with our family, even though I was trying desperately to shield him from the worst of it. He'd ask me why Mommy seemed angry all the time, why we weren't eating dinner together as a family anymore, why I was sleeping in the spare bedroom. He was only 8 years old, but perceptive enough to know his family was falling apart, though too young to really understand why. It broke my heart into pieces every single time he asked me about it. I tried to keep our father-son routines as normal and stable as possible, but kids aren't stupid. They pick up on tension and unhappiness, even when adults try hard to hide it. My sister Melissa stepped up in absolutely huge ways during this difficult time. She started picking Tyler up from school several days a week, taking him to the park and out for ice cream, helping with his homework, having him over for sleepovers with his cousins. She created these wonderful pockets of normalcy and joy and stability for him while his home life was steadily disintegrating around him. I was so grateful for her support, I could barely express it adequately. After about a month of methodically gathering evidence and watching Jennifer's relationship with Derek become increasingly blatant, I decided it was finally time to confront Derek directly and personally. Ryan strongly advised against it, genuinely worried I'd lose my temper and do something that would seriously hurt my custody case in court. But I needed Derek to understand on a visceral level that I wasn't going to just roll over and disappear quietly from Jennifer's life. I needed him to see me as a real human being whose life and family he was systematically destroying, not just some abstract obstacle to his latest romantic conquest. Through Jennifer's increasingly careless phone conversations that she conducted right in front of me, I learned that Derek spent Friday evenings at this pretentious upscale steakhouse downtown. It was apparently his regular spot to see and be seen by the city's business elite, to network with potential clients and show off for whatever woman he was currently pursuing and manipulating. I put on my best suit and showed up at the steakhouse around 8:30 on a Friday night. The place was absolutely packed with exactly the kind of pretentious crowd I'd expected. Lots of forced loud laughter and designer clothes and people constantly checking their expensive phones while pretending to be fully engaged in conversation. I spotted Derek immediately at a large corner table, surrounded by what looked like junior executives and professional hangers-on, all of them laughing way too hard at his jokes and hanging on his every word. He was clearly in his absolute element, playing his favorite role of successful mentor and powerful executive. I walked straight up to his table without any hesitation, and the conversation died immediately. Everyone turned to stare at me, and Derek leaned back arrogantly in his chair with this infuriating, smug smile plastered across his face. He said something incredibly condescending about how he was genuinely surprised I had the courage to show my face here, that I should just accept the reality that Jennifer had outgrown me and move on with whatever dignity I had left. His little audience of sycophants snickered appreciatively. He was performing for them, showing off his power to publicly humiliate the boring suburban husband. Something inside me just snapped completely. I've never been a violent person in my entire adult life. I haven't thrown a punch in genuine anger since middle school. But in that moment, all the accumulated rage and humiliation and pain of the past months came flooding out like a dam breaking. I hit Derek square in the jaw with absolutely everything I had behind it. The crack of impact was audible across the entire restaurant. Derek's head snapped back violently, and he went down hard, his chair tipping backward, his expensive wine spilling in a red flood across the pristine white tablecloth. The entire restaurant went completely silent. People's forks stopped halfway to their mouths in shock. Derek scrambled awkwardly to his feet, his face bright red with rage and embarrassment, and came at me with his fists raised like some kind of street fighter, but he was completely uncoordinated and off balance, had probably been drinking expensive wine for hours. I sidestepped him easily and caught his arm, twisting it sharply behind his back with more force than was probably necessary. I heard a distinct, audible crack, and Derek let out a genuinely agonized scream, collapsing heavily against a nearby table and clutching his dislocated shoulder. Several of his dining companions jumped up in alarm. Someone yelled urgently for the manager. The whole scene devolved into complete chaos. The restaurant manager came rushing over looking panicked, and I very calmly explained that Derek had been having an ongoing affair with my wife and had been verbally taunting and insulting me aggressively since the moment I arrived at his table. Several diners at nearby tables immediately backed me up, nodding in agreement and saying loudly that they'd heard Derek being verbally aggressive and deliberately provocative toward me. Even the manager, who'd apparently dealt with Derek's arrogance on previous occasions, seemed genuinely sympathetic to my side of the story. When the police arrived and started taking detailed statements from everyone, the witnesses all corroborated my version of events. Derek had provoked me with insults and taunts. I'd defended myself with one punch, and he'd gotten seriously injured when he drunkenly attacked me, and I defended myself. The ambulance came and took Derek away on a stretcher with a badly dislocated shoulder. As they wheeled him past me, I leaned down close and told him quietly that this was just the beginning, that he had absolutely no idea what was coming for him next. The following Monday morning, I had my attorney serve Jennifer with comprehensive divorce papers at her workplace. It was absolutely a calculated move designed to humiliate her as publicly as possible. The courier walked into her office building at 10 in the morning, asked for Jennifer by name at the reception desk, and handed her the thick legal envelope right in the middle of the main floor, where all her coworkers could clearly see what was happening. I heard later from someone who worked there that Jennifer's hands were visibly shaking as she opened the envelope, that the color completely drained from her face as she read through the detailed filing that laid out every single piece of damning evidence I'd gathered against her over the past month. The divorce papers were comprehensive and absolutely devastating to her case. I was suing for sole custody of Tyler, with only supervised visitation for Jennifer. I presented extensive evidence of her ongoing infidelity, her systematic misuse of marital funds to finance her affair, her emotional absence as a mother for the past 6 months. I included multiple character witness statements from Melissa, from Tyler's teachers who'd noticed Jennifer had stopped showing up for school events, from our neighbors who'd observed her increasingly erratic behavior. My attorney had built an absolutely airtight case demonstrating that Jennifer was not fit to have primary custody of our son. Then Detective Barnes made his coordinated move. The very next day after Jennifer was publicly served, he showed up at Derek's office with an official warrant and 2 FBI agents who specialized in financial crimes and corporate fraud. They seized Derek's office computer, his personal files, his work phone, absolutely everything. The company immediately placed him on administrative leave while they conducted their own panicked internal investigation. Within just 48 hours of carefully examining Derek's financial records and computer files, they'd found more than enough concrete evidence of embezzlement, securities fraud, and financial misconduct to immediately terminate him and file serious criminal charges. They also issued a public statement announcing they were cooperating fully with law enforcement and implementing strict new oversight procedures. Derek's criminal trial happened about 6 months later. The prosecution had built an absolutely overwhelming case against him. Multiple counts of embezzlement totaling over $400,000, securities fraud, wire fraud, multiple counts of sexual maltreatment, and systematic misuse of power under federal workplace discrimination laws. His sufferers' testimonies were incredibly powerful and heartbreaking. One by one, these strong, accomplished professional women described in painful detail how Derek had systematically destroyed their confidence, their careers, and, in some cases, their mental health. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours before returning guilty verdicts on almost every single charge. Derek was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay full restitution. The custody hearing was emotionally brutal, but legally straightforward. The judge awarded me full custody, and Jennifer got only supervised visitation twice monthly. Jennifer's life fell apart completely. She lost her job, her reputation, her social circle. She ended up serving tables and moved into a small studio apartment. To her credit, she eventually started therapy and slowly began rebuilding her relationship with Tyler, though it remained strained. Tyler and I built a wonderful new life together. Saturday morning pancakes, Lego building sessions, evening walks, bedtime stories every night. I picked up woodworking again and started running. About 8 months later, my sister introduced me to Amanda, a single mom who'd been through her own difficult divorce. We connected over coffee, and our relationship developed slowly and naturally over several months. Her kids and Tyler became close friends. With Amanda, everything felt balanced and genuine, built on mutual respect rather than manipulation. I also started speaking at support groups for people dealing with divorce and betrayal, and began writing online about resilience and rebuilding. Hundreds of people reached out saying my words had helped them feel less alone. Turning my pain into something that could help others gave me unexpected purpose and meaning. Looking back now, almost 2 years later, I'm genuinely grateful for how everything unfolded. The betrayal was devastating and the divorce was brutal, but that crisis forced me to rediscover who I was and build something better. Jennifer is working on herself, and I hope she becomes the mother Tyler deserves, but that's her journey now. Derek is in prison where he belongs. And me? I'm sitting on my porch watching Tyler play with Amanda's kids, planning our camping trip, genuinely excited about the future. This is what real happiness looks like, and it's so much better than what I had before. I learned you can't control other people's choices, but you absolutely can control your response. I chose to protect my son, stand up for myself with dignity, expose the truth, and rebuild with integrity. Those choices made all the difference. The storm passed, and what remained was stronger and more authentic than anything that came before.